Thank you, Josh. I will now call the regular meeting of the MWPA Board of Directors to order on March 21st, 2024. Josh, could you please take roll to ensure that we have a quorum?
The Bottle Fire District,
Here.
Southern Marin Fire District, Kentfield Fire Department, Marin Wood Community Services District, Town of Corte Madera, Salinas Fire District,
Here.
County Marin,
Here.
City of Larkspur,
Here.
City of San Rafael,
Here.
Town of Ross,
Here.
Inverness Public Utilities District,
Here.
Muir Beach Community Services District,
Here.
Town of Fairfax, Town of San Anselmo,
Here.
City of Mill Valley, and Sleepy Hollow,
Stinson.
and Stinson Beach.
Thank you. Do any board members or staff have any adjustments to the agenda? Number 4, open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the Board of Directors at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the board. Please be advised that pursuant to the Government Code Section 54954.2, the board is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting and mute your microphone when you are not reporting out. Josh, are there any public comments?
I see no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Number 5, Executive Officers Report. Executive Officer Mark Brown will give this report.
Good afternoon, President McMillan, board members. Let me get my screen share going. And I think you all know that we are in Women's History Month. We tracked down a really nice thing to say about the background of Women's History Month. And I decided to speak from the heart instead, if you don't mind. The fire service is tremendously unbalanced when it comes to its balance of diversity, whether it's color of skin or male, female. And then I look at the MWPA and I see the tremendous balance and I see the powerful women that are very involved with the MWPA. And I think it's just a great example for a lot of the fire service to follow. And then I just think about all of the women that were in positions to help create the MWPA. And then we have all the people that are, all the women that are in place now, whether it's our board members, our staff, our consultants, and then our members of the public, whether it's part of the COC, ecologically sound practices, other community groups that are working with us side by side, or perhaps concerned about our work, but they're really helping us hold ourselves accountable. And if you look at all of that, you can see that the shape of the MWPA, what the MWPA is, has a lot to do with the women that have been involved and continue to be involved from day one. And I mean, you look at our team that we have, you look at the board members that we have and the community members, their ability is beyond compare. So that's my heartfelt thanks in acknowledgement for Women's History Month. And then I would be remiss if I didn't take a chance to talk about the two women that are personally most influential in my life, and that would be my mom, who completely, one of the, I think the most important thing she instilled with me was never stop learning. And then for my wife, being next to me since 1986, and putting up with me side by side, but there's been no one that's ever supported me more than her. And by far, I have learned more about empathy through my wife than anybody else. So I just figured I'd speak from the heart for Women's History Month. Now on to business, work plan development season, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but we are full force ahead. Again, the strength of the MWPA or Marin Wildfire is our member agencies and the effort that they are putting into the work plan that they develop every year. We did have a finance committee meeting earlier this month to work out the budget framework, also make any recommendations for the CPI, as you see, that's in consent. Our JPA language ad hoc subcommittee had a very successful meeting. We poured through the recommended edits, and as a reminder, those edits were crafted by Dan Ireland, Matthew Heimel, Jason Weber, Dan Schwartz, myself, Megan, and reached out to Stephen Robb and one other attorney who I can't ever remember his name, just to get some more advice on that. Had a great ad hoc subcommittee meeting. We have caught those edits. We're sending it back to the committee for review. I'm on the schedule for the Marin Managers Association on the 18th to get their feedback. I also plan to bring it to a meeting of the operations committee to get their feedback, and then we'll bring it to the exec and then the board, probably June, July for that. We had a great article authored by Rachel Kurtz and Catherine Way in Western City magazine. And that's connected with the League of Cities, right? And they are encouraging us to present at their next conference. We've already presented once, but that was when we were brand new. And they're saying it would be great for you to return and talk about some of the things that you've done. We have filmed 2 episodes of Open Roads, which is Doug McConnell. One of the episodes is Fire Foundry. It's all about the foundry. And we had an opportunity with a lot of the MWPA staff to meet with the Fire Foundry recently with a wildfire ecology walk up in the San Rafael San Anselmo fuel reduction zone. And the Open Roads filmed some of that. And then for the Marin Wildfire piece, we have Jason Weber talking, Mike Swayze, myself, and with my role, we did a lot of the evacuation stuff. Todd Lando, and then defensible space inspection with Kathleen Cutter, who's great. I think I mentioned this at the exec committee, but our relationship with Stanford continues to be strong. I had an opportunity to meet with one of their classes to present about what Marin Wildfire does. Some of them are actually making this one of their research topics that they have for the class. We do have chapter 3 of the Marin Wildfire story that's being drafted by Stanford grad students. So that's in process now. And we've also been able to connect on a deeper level with some of the Stanford academics, Matthew Warra being one of them, and that is helping the state create a sustainable pathway to insurance and making sure that we have insurance continuing in California. Excellent recruitment for senior wildfire mitigation specialists, 28 applicants, 20 went through a pre-screen, so an interview via Zoom. And on Monday of next week, 10 of them will be coming in here for in-person interviews to hire 2. So I've seen the resumes. It's going to be a difficult decision to make, which is the type of decision that we want to have, right? We want those difficult decisions between highly qualified candidates. And then I guess I'm speaking from the heart a lot today, but I'm going to get a little philosophical on us. And that is, I want to talk about us as Marin Wildfire, keeping our promise to the taxpayers. Measure C and the JPA language spells out that promise that we made to the taxpayers back in 2020. And we are following the commitments of both those documents to the letter. We're meeting or exceeding legal requirements for environmental compliance, and we're doing so side by side with our environmental partners. And that relationship is being recognized across the state as first of its kind. I talked to other fire agencies, they don't have the relationship with environmental stakeholders that we do. And they're looking at us as a model of how that can work. We're also being used as a model of how governmental entities should work, how we're nimble, how we are reacting to what the requests of our public. A lot of the projects that we are doing is because of the public saying, this is an identified need. Can you take care of that? And we are. And we're efficient. We're getting work done. Some people don't think that we're taking an aggressive enough approach with some of our vegetation management. They would like us to see take a bigger cut. And then we have other people that think we should be taking less of a cut. We're not ever going to please everybody. But as long as we follow what the language of Measure C and the ordinance or the JPA says, and we follow science, then we know that we're on the right path. And the science is saying that we are on the right path. And we really have to take a systems approach. We can't just do home hardening. We can't just do veg management. We have to do everything. We have to start at the home, work out from there, and consider all of it. It'd be like getting in your car and not wearing your seatbelt anymore because you have airbags. Or we have accident avoidance systems built into our cars, but we still have airbags. We still have seatbelts. We need to use all of those systems. And that's what we're doing. And the pace and scale at which we're doing this is something that no one has been able to compete with yet. And we're able to do that because this team that we have and the team that we've assembled is beyond compare, in my opinion. And that's how we're able to get this work done. And then you as the board have said, we want to do this in a transparent way. And we can honestly look in the mirror and say that we have been absolutely transparent as we've done all of our work. So I just wanted to get that out because we've been doing some projects that are not what everyone wants to see. And we have been engaging with everybody in a very transparent manner and being very honest and open with everybody with what we're doing. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Mark. Questions from the board? Josh, can you see if there's any public comment?
A reminder for those joining by phone that you can press *6 to unmute yourself and *9 to raise your hand. And with that being said, there are no raised hands at this time.
Okay, I'll bring this back to the board for any discussion. Seeing none, we will move on to number 6, the consent calendar.
And before we go too far with the consent calendar, we were notified of one error in the minutes. If we can document that as part of the motion, it showed that the Director Feynman was present and she was not. So we'll make those corrections.
Okay, great. The opportunity for public comment on the consent calendar items will occur prior to the board's discussion of the consent calendar. The board may approve the entire consent calendar with one action, and the alternative items on the consent calendar may be removed by any board or staff member for separate discussion and vote. I will now take public comment on the consent calendar.
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great, thank you. Do any board members wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, could we please have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Is there a second? Yes, thank you. All those in favor of approving the consent calendar with the amendment to the meeting minutes? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Number 7, staff reports. A, March MWPA Finance Report. Treasurer Alyssa Schiffman will provide the board with a staff report for this item. Alyssa.
Great timing, Elisa. We're on with staff report for finance if you're available.
There she is.
Oh, here I am. I didn't know you were talking to me yet. Sorry about that.
Welcome.
Let's see. I don't have anything new to report except that we're working on next year's budget. And we've gotten last year's project reporting out to the Finance Committee.
Great.
And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
And I'll touch on one thing that I know that we've had one board member bring up, and it's a glaring over budget, and that is with our evacuation management platform. You see that we're well over budget. That's because of the slight increase of cost for the Genesis Protect, and then the expensive increase for Ladris. So we went tremendously over budget for that, but that's a subscription that spans over 2 budget years or fiscal years. So we'll use the budget from next fiscal to cover the shortage that we have in this fiscal. And it's a 3-year subscription, but the invoice is 1 year for each calendar year. So it'll be for the first year's subscription.
Questions from the board about the finance report? Public comment on this item, Josh? Any hands raised?
No hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Any further discussion by the board on the finance report? Item B, work plan implementation update. Planning and Program Manager Ann Krelak will provide the board with a report on this item.
Great, thank you. Today, we'll just cover a couple of topics. First, I want to note that one of our large projects got underway today. And so this is an exciting day. This is the San Rafael San Anselmo Fuel Reduction Zone project. Initially, this is a project that's about 150 acres, give or take. It's a eucalyptus thinning project, not a clear cut of eucalyptus trees. The larger eucalyptus trees will stay, but the smaller diameter, densely packed eucalyptus trees will be removed. To get our feet wet, we narrowed down to a 10-acre area for our pilot project location. And even within that, we've narrowed it down further to 3.8 acres based on where some wet soils are, where some possible nesting activity could be or could have been. And so the area in yellow in this figure is the area where we got started today. Just so you know, we take the environmental compliance process and biological resources very, very seriously. So we started by conducting some nesting bird surveys earlier in March just to check it out and see what kind of activity we were seeing. That helped us kind of narrow down that initial area where we would start treatment. We did a full survey 320, that's yesterday, to get a really good idea for any possible nesting activity within this area. The yellow area where we started work today was totally clear of any nesting activity. And so we got started this morning. Crew training, of course, with all of our core projects occurs in Spanish and English, covers a wide variety of topics, including nesting birds with photos and instructions on what to do if you see something, how to identify the flagging out there if there are active nests. It covers plants. In this location, there aren't a lot of native plants in the area, but we do keep an eye out for native trees and other understory species that would remain. And then we also cover things like cultural resources. So in this area, for example, this is a cemetery. And so we have archaeologists engaged to make sure we're avoiding any historic cultural resources. So we also wanted to, because there's quite a bit of public interest in this project, we have staff on site today and in the future to answer any questions, lots of interested public. I'm going to invite Ted Briggs up to talk a little bit more about how it went today. And some of the outreach that we've been doing as well. And you're great. Thank you.
Okay, I think it works. Can you hear me all? Hear me okay? Great. So I spent most of the day out at the site today. It was a very exciting day. I was talking with Kate Anderson at San Rafael Fire Department, who had said that she started on this project in November of 2020, so 3.5 years ago. So it's been a very exciting day, both for San Rafael Fire and for ourselves. And Ann is correct. We did start the day with the crew with a comprehensive environmental orientation to the kinds of things that we're interested in, and ensuring that the obligations that we have under Cal VTP are met. Myself and members of the San Rafael Fire Department were on site to talk with the interested public as they happen to come up. We did block off some of the roads. You can see there that there were roads blocked and for the public's safety. Lots of interest in what was going on, and when we explained what it was about, that we were in the process of clearing some of the eucalyptus, most people said that the general reaction was, "Thank goodness, it's about time. And as far as I'm concerned, you can take it all out." I said, "No, that's not what we're doing." I said, "I appreciate the enthusiasm, but there are standards that are important to meet here." And so it was a great day. In the final picture, you can see over here that there are trees on the ground. I would say that today the crew covered about a quarter of an acre, and the chainsaws didn't start up until about 10:30. We had training to do. They had to figure things out, figure out how they were going to site and orient the equipment, block the roads, that kind of thing. But they figured that they should be able to get about a half an acre done per day. And the work days for them will be roughly from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. So given that pace, it should take roughly 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks to clear this, maybe 3.5 weeks to clear this first site, this first treatment area. Any questions?
And I'll just add in the slide, we've got a couple of flyers that were distributed in the neighborhoods adjacent to this area. We and San Rafael Fire walked neighborhoods and talked to people one-on-one and made sure that people had their questions answered. You'll notice a QR code, and that takes you to the project webpage, which has updated frequently asked questions, documents, and other resources. So we really wanted to make sure that we were reaching out and reaching the people who would be seeing and hearing this activity. So, and then I've got, maybe if you can stand by for more questions, we've
Sure.
got a couple more topics to cover.
Sure. Actually, we also have a question here on the
Okay,
right hand.
great.
You said it was a cemetery property. What's the name of that cemetery?
Mount Tamalpais Cemetery. It's the one at the end of Fifth Avenue.
Okay, so that structure that you saw in that first image, was that part of the cemetery structure? I just was curious about it.
Are you in this
Go
here?
back one more. That long, at
Yes.
the very bottom, that long horizontal structure?
Yes, that is part of the cemetery.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned that you have some equipment on site, or are you hand felling? Do you have any mechanized equipment yet, or do you plan mechanized equipment on the project?
Yeah, great
eventually?
question. At the moment, the felling is occurring with chainsaws. And then the felled materials are being moved by a tracked bobcat that has a grappler on the end, and they're dragging them down off the slope and piling them off to the side. Mhm.
Great, thank you. So we'll just cover a couple more topics today. Oop. As Mark mentioned, okay. Yeah, I totally agree. QR codes are very useful for certain folks and not always useful for everyone else. So we are trying to get the word out in a variety of different ways. The one-on-one conversations that occurred during this particular effort were really helpful, answered a lot of questions. People were generally really happy about this project and very excited to see it move forward. More, I think, flyers, walking neighborhoods, and reaching out to some of the Firewise communities adjacent, I think would be great. So if you have additional ideas, please feel free to share them. Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And we did get a couple of comments, I think, from folks walking through the project area going, "Oh, this is the flyer." Okay, so in addition, we are also planning for next fiscal year. As you are aware, And the Advisory Technical Committee and Operations Committee are both meeting quite frequently. The Advisory Technical Committee and Ops met recently. We're going to hear from Chief Tyler here with a bit of a summary. ATC is meeting next, April 3rd, and then again in April on the 24th. Ops is also meeting April 11th and again on May 2nd. So without going into too much detail and talking about things that Chief Tyler will be talking about, we have set some deadlines, around submitting project proposals for next fiscal year. March 1st was the first deadline for folks, partly MWPA staff as well, to enter into the portal and then, our draft budget. What JPA-wide proposals we're thinking, this is, operations budget, public information, environmental compliance, things like that. And then member agencies are also submitting proposals for zone-specific projects and ideas. And then we're kind of fine-tuning QA/QCing those, and then we'll be discussing those at our April meetings. So lots of opportunity for public comment. And we also, because transparency is so important to us and how we function, all of the JPA-wide proposals that have been submitted are available for anyone to view on our webpage. So if you go to the homepage, marinwildfire.org, you go to the upper left-hand corner, JPA portal, that's where you can find all of the things that have been submitted thus far. So anyone listening here can go take a look. And then lastly, I'd like to invite Stephen Torrance, Director of Emergency Management with the Office of Emergency Management, to come and say a few words.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you to the MWPA for having us this afternoon. Just here to give a quick report on our use of the Ladra software, which was brought on by MWPA. For those of you that are not familiar with it, is an AI software that allows for us to do traffic modeling specific to evacuation planning, and also how do we actually respond. The goal with this is to take it not only from the planning side, but all the way through the operations side. So not only just something that is hosted by the Office of Emergency Management, but also implemented by the law enforcement out in the field. And so with that, this is a joint collaboration between all of the member agencies, and we're actually starting to bring on our law enforcement partners, because what we would like to see is this tool primarily used in the field, but also something that we can use on the evacuation planning side. So just a couple of weeks ago, we started working with MWPA and the Ladris AI team to really start looking at how the system can be used. And I'm happy to say on day one, we were really able to start putting the system to work. So because the system is mostly already built out, there's a Zone Haven, which has the grids for us to be able to click and say, this is the specific zone we would like to evacuate. We had 2 members from our team able to log into the system on day one and really start just kind of seeing how long it would take to evacuate certain areas from the county. For instance, we just using some very quick modeling. For us, we would like to know how long would it take to actually evacuate people from Stinson Beach in the event that there's a wildfire or a tsunami. And so we use that modeling to say, okay, well, we want to start evacuating people out of these zones, which are high fire danger areas, and send them across the county. And we got some really interesting numbers. And so with that, being able to say, okay, now we have a general idea of how long it would actually take to evacuate, the daily population in Stinson Beach. But if let's say they had 150% of their normal population, how long would that take? Now we can actually say that we have some numbers for us to base on. Also, what are the preferred routes that should be taken in that situation? So the system that we're starting to look at it on the planning side, and then our next couple of steps that we have are, once we have an understanding of actually how to go through and check the right boxes on the system, the vendor and our team are going to really start working on a tabletop exercise. So we've actually already connected with 2 of our police departments and the sheriff's department in the county, and also the fire department teams. And what we're going to be doing is a tabletop exercise, hopefully in late April, with our partner agencies, to say, in the event that the Office of Emergency Management has this data, and we know that an evacuation is going to happen in the field as a law enforcement officer, and you want to get people out of an area, how long is that going to take? What tools are needed in the field to actually do this the right way? And then also, what kind of data can we start forecasting in the event that we know an incident is breaking? So with that, we believe that this is going to be a very quick process for our field units, and being able to not only use the situational awareness that we have here in the Emergency Operations Center, we can send information to them, but the goal is for this tool to be something that they can use, whether they have a tablet device or a cell phone in the field, and they can run that software themselves. Just in case we're bogged down supporting other field response mechanism features that are out in the field. So with that, we are in the very early steps. So this first iteration of doing our tabletop exercise in April will be a really great opportunity for us to see this in motion from not only on the planning side, but in the event that we need to use this in the real world. Here's how our law enforcement, how our fire departments can help expeditiously move traffic throughout an area. Because we always get a lot of questions of how long is it going to take to evacuate my neighborhood? And I know that's historically been a very hard answer for us because we don't want to just say it's going to take X long. Now we have some data that we can at least have a baseline level to say we have a general idea, and also here are the things that we can do better. Here's where our pinch points based off of this AI software show us that the pinch points will be. And that way we can start targeting some of our mitigation projects down the road. This is one of those things that I jokingly say to Mark, I wish we had this, before we did our hazard mitigation plan, because it would have definitely been great. But also when we do when we do the next iteration, now we have additional data that goes and shows why certain roads are important. And so with that, I look forward to the next couple of months. I definitely think as we get into this year's wildfire season, that we were going to have a lot of strong data behind the decisions that are being made. And our goal is to be able to look at certain communities that are in the very high fire danger area, start looking at those and have those models already run, saved on a PDF, ready to go. So we don't have to run the model in the midst, but it would be good to run that model just in case, just to see if there's any new changes, especially with traffic changing and with the ebbs and flows. So there's a lot of good information that's starting to come down the pipeline, and probably in the next couple of months, you'll start seeing some products. But thank you very much. If
Thank
there's
you.
any questions, happy to address.
Questions, Kathy?
Yes. Thank you, Stephen. You mentioned that you're going to be doing a tabletop drill. Have you indicated who's going to be the pilot entities that's going to be taking part in that?
Yeah, so right now we are working with the Sheriff's Department and Mill Valley Mill Valley Police as our two law enforcement agencies. And then once we start getting a baseline understanding there, then we're going to roll it out a little bit farther. But we want to make sure that it's going to be working for our local agencies before we really roll it out.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Dennis?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. You might take this opportunity to talk about your Alert Marin test on Saturday.
Will do. Thank you. So this is actually the first time that we've done this test before. The Alert Marin system, which is hosted by Everbridge, it is their countywide alert and warning system, which allows for us to send not only phone calls, text messages, and emails, but we can also do things like sending wireless emergency alerts. We will not be doing that as part of the test, because what we want to do is we want to focus on how long does it take for an alert to get from our system to every single person in this county. And so with that, we want to start off with our opted-in users. And so with that, right now, we've had about a month of a campaign where we've been asking people to opt into the Alert Marin system. Although we are, working with Everbridge, they already say that we have a very high opt-in rate for our county, which is great. I still don't think 60% is high enough. I want to see 100% opted in. And so with that, we are working with the cities and towns to let them know where their opt-in rates are as of February 21st. And then on March 23rd, we will get, when the alert goes out, we're going to take a baseline check there to say how many opted-in users have we seen already to date. And our team is actually running the numbers right now. Just from February 23rd to today, which I'm running a blank up. Today's the 21st. Thank you for putting it on there. The 21st, we've actually already seen 2,400 new opt-ins into the Alert Marin system. With that, the campaign that we've been pushing to get people opted into the system has been working for us. This also allows for us to clean up the data that's in there. The data that's in the system is only as good as what people opt in. So we encourage people to now verify it. And we've had a lot of people recognize that, oh, this is not the right number. And so with that, at 10 o'clock on Saturday, we will be sending out an alert. It will be to the opt-in users only. More than likely, you will receive a call on your home, cell phone, email, text message, all at the same time. That's not normally how Alert Marines go out, but this is our way of testing the system in its full capacity. Just in case you get a message and your phone rang, but you didn't pick it up, you're still going to get it on your text message or your cell phone. So if you don't, alertmarin.org is our website. If you haven't verified your information or signed up, please go sign up, and then hopefully you will get our message on Saturday at 10 o'clock. And if you don't, OEM@marincounty.org. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Stephen?
Thank you for that. And even just that is one of the comparison tools that we're looking for down the road. Even just using, some of the questions that we get from the public are, what if this road is closed? And, rightfully so, people have questions and we want to be able to answer that. And we can run that model by putting a roadblock and tell them the difference in the time. We can say, if that road were to be blocked, this is how much time it's increased. We actually ran one interesting model where there is actually a decrease with a road being blocked, which was interesting. And so we're working with the vendor to figure out if that is something that was an error or if it was something that is like, oh, okay, that's probably a good thing, because there's less opportunities for people to cross and intersect, which is also good information for us to have to work with the local public works teams and things of that nature. So having that Google baseline information is another check on this AI software to say, yes, we're in the right pathway and this model is actually valid.
Christine?
Thank you so much, Stephen. So my question is, my understanding is that in Marin County, fire season can generally be around July, October timeframe, depending on rain. And so my question is, how long do you anticipate being in the tabletop stage? And what does the rollout strategy look like? So particularly, I'm asking this because we're all leaders in our community. And as we think about various regions, some have choke points. Like, for example, in my region, it's Highway 1. That's the only way people are coming in and out. And so I want to understand, how will the firefighters out at Muir Beach get this information and be trained on how to use it? The software you mentioned and download it onto their phones. What does that rollout strategy look like?
So that's part of I'll walk back and say the OEM team is using it right now. And so as far as being able to have that information ready to go to run those models, we can do that today. And I'm confident in our teams being able to say, in the event that we got a call from, whether it be Marin County Fire or Mill Valley or Southern Marin Fire, if they needed us to run a model, we could do that within 5 minutes. And so that rollout process for us is trying to take it to a place where OEM is actually not the ones that are running the model and it's the field that's running it. We do anticipate that will take a little bit longer. And so with that, once we have the tabletop, that's where we'll get the feedback for our law enforcement partners to figure out, how is this system actually going to be used, and then what things are we missing in the planning. What devices do we need? Do we need this to be on a cell phone, or does it need to be better served on a desktop tablet within their vehicles? So those are some of the things that we're looking to learn, but I think it will be a very quick rollout once we have that tabletop exercise.
Any other questions? Josh, public comment?
I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay, any other comments from the board?
And if I may, we're getting a few text messages from our public saying that some of the directors have not been coming across very loud. So
Oh.
just please remember to speak well into the mic.
I just wanted to comment that I think it's wonderful that you've kind of taken this over and your whole department is managing it. It's great that it was initiated by Marin Wildfire. And it's involving so many other agencies. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Number 8, committee reports. February Fire Safe Marin Report. Rich Shortall will provide a report on this item. Hi, Rich.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. Again, the report's pretty self-explanatory. One thing you'll probably notice that the format of the report keeps evolving, so we're trying to make it as user-friendly as possible. So if any of you have comments about how it's working for you or not, just please let us know, and we're happy to make changes if we need to. But other than that, hopefully it's working for everybody. So I won't go through it. I will add one thing. It's mentioned in there. We've been undergoing for the last couple of months a major rebuild of our website. In some ways, our website is really the flagship of the organization because it gets in the range of 200,000 visits a year. So it's been completely updated top to bottom. Lots of new images, more videos added to it, a lot of rewrites, and then the addition of a lot more information on there. So if you have time, take a spin through it. There's a lot there, and it's very standardized, and I think it's much more user-friendly than it was in the past. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Rich. Questions from the board? Any public comment, Josh?
No hands raised at this time.
I think I'll let Chief Tyler summarize where we are because he's here representing the Operations Committee, and Chief Martin wasn't able to join us today. But I will note that the Advisory Technical Committee and Operations Committee has ad hoc subcommittees to really dive into any questions and concerns and ideas around the proposals. And the ATC's ad hoc subcommittee met for the first time today to talk through JPA-wide proposals. And so we'll continue to meet and discuss proposals and discuss any ideas that come up and keep moving our work plan forward.
Chief Tyler?
Hello? Everyone can hear me? All right, thank you very much. Just a couple of items. So the operations team met last on March 14th. And, we had a very well-prepared presentations that was very similar to what the ATC has. And so, you've got a committed group of professionals. Our ops group is made up of, city managers, fire chiefs, et cetera. And so it was a well-attended meeting and all participants are very engaged. What we did was basically, we got an update on some of the projects that you've already heard updates on, but I'd like to call it kind of like speed dating with regards to the JPA core project. So they called them flash presentations. We went through about 12 or 13 different items that are going to be covered under the core in kind of rapid succession. And so it was a great opportunity to raise our level of awareness around those items. And then we are going to be meeting separately as a group, an ad hoc group of ops to dive into those 12 or 13 individual items for that are being funded through the core. And so I believe we have one tentatively meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. I'm not sure what that one's going to hold or not, but we're looking to have at least 2 or more meetings to be able to go over those. And I would share with you, there's general agreement, I think, across all of the chiefs and city managers on those. There might be just some slight tweaks to how they get implemented or the amount funded. It's our understanding that the budget, we can anticipate a slight increase over last year. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2% or slightly higher than 2%. And so we're very much looking forward to diving in. I also want to just share that we were very, very impressed with the work that the Willow Labs is doing. Charlotte's kind of helping to oversee and walk us through that, where we're taking all of the different projects, the work that's being done, and be able to demonstrate the reduction in both flame lengths and area where firefighters can get in and protect those homes. And when we're able to communicate that back to the public and also communicate it to our firefighters, it's very, very important work. And I just want to remind everyone that we not forget our firefighters when we try and share all of the work that the MWPA is doing and all of that. And so that's something that particularly in our agency also we're taking the time to swing back around and share with them. At the last ops meeting also, we were the white paper was shared with us on shaded fuel breaks and the benefits. And so those are types of things that we need to push out to the public. They need to get a hold of this information and understand the importance of not only doing it the first time, but then the frequency of keeping it updated and what we can expect, the flame lengths and the fire spread to be reduced as a result of that, for example. So that's kind of the highlights. And I'll just share the names of the people on the ad hoc subcommittee. It's myself, Todd Cusimano, Jason Weber, John Stefanski, and either Dan Mahoney or Mark Pomey. Those are going to be the folks reviewing the projects for you. And then in addition to those ad hoc meetings, we will meet again on April 11th as an ops committee, and then again on May 2nd. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chief Tyler. Questions from the board? Josh, any public comment? Oh, I'm sorry, Bruce.
Thanks, Bill, for a great report, and Ann also on the work planning, really great stuff. My question is, we've become aware that one TAM was a recipient of, I think, was it $4.8 million grant to help begin work under the Marin County Forest Health Restoration Strategy. And those agencies sit at the table, at our table also in developing their program work and plan of work. So I'm wondering, is that infusion of money, is that helping us augment our work? Are they bringing that money to the table to, to augment, accelerate, or is there yet just probably work to get done to have those kinds of discussions? So that's my question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
The vast majority of that grant was geared towards Marin Waters land as well as state parks, Tomales Bay State Park. However, our project in Marin City was included in that grant. So that project of creating defensible space, a shaded fuel break around the community of Marin City will be included in that grant.
Just makes sense. So yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Anybody else? Board members? Josh, anybody from the public?
No hands raised.
Any further discussion, comments?
If I could just add one other thing, there's going to be a lot of focus, I think, around Zone 0 going forward. We're trying to really increase the educational component around that, but there's a lot of work being done right now at the state level also as they begin to roll out the implementation and the final rulemaking around that 0 to 5 feet. And so I just wanted to share with you that we're engaged at all levels. I'm going to the state capitol tomorrow. I've been invited to be a part of a committee that's working on that problem of Zone 0. So I'll be there all day with a lot of other folks that have an interest in this. And I think you're going to see that as it rolls out. I believe it's about 2025 is when they think is going to be the first implementation and enforcement of that. And then in local responsibility areas around 2026. So it's coming, and a lot of work needs to be done ahead of time. And we are engaging with our partners. For example, AAA just recently did a contest of students that are landscape architects where they submitted designs. I'm also sitting on a committee, that are sort of taking those designs and they're receiving awards based on. So we're really trying to push this out into this new paradigm of how things are going to need to look going forward, because it's really going to be a big change for people. So thank you.
Chief Tyler, do you have any idea when the rules will actually be issued? I know you said they won't be effective until 2025 or.
I'll know more tomorrow.
Okay.
After tomorrow. Yeah,
Maybe you
we're
will.
getting an update at the Capitol and then we'll, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Anne. That was a great report. Number 9, presentations. Wildfire risk modeling for goals 1, vegetation management, and 5, defensible space and home hardening. MWPA consultant Charlotte Jourdain will provide a presentation on this item. Charlotte.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, board members. Per your board's previous request, I'm going to provide a little bit of context around the presentation that was just mentioned in Chief Tyler's update on what we're now calling a data-driven wildfire risk framework by the analysis that's performed by Scott Farley at Willow Labs. And he will take on after my introduction. So Scott, can you move one slide forward, please? As a reminder, your board has approved several values together with its strategic plan. The work of Willow Labs and together with a Sonoma Tech evacuation risk assessment and others is grounded in this particular value here, that our work be guided by science to achieve meaningful and measurable wildfire hazard reduction, and that our work will adapt as science changes over time, and it is changing fast. Next slide, please, Scott. So I just wanted to, like I said, provide context around our assessment and modeling efforts. Why do we need to quantify risk? Well, because we're a prevention authority. So without knowing what the risk is, we really can't do a lot of prevention. So the main reasons I've outlined on this slide, quantifying risk helps us design better programs and projects because we can understand the nature of the risk, where the risk is more concentrated or preeminent throughout our geography. We can also understand the limitation of, for example, fuel mitigation activities and how to address any residual risk after the implementation of fuel break, defensible space, home hardening. So for example, for whatever reason, a fuel break treatment might not completely limit the risk the way we would want it to. So we need to supplement that effort with additional outreach and education effort in the nearby community. Quantifying risk helps us prioritize our projects, both in terms of implementation, but also maintenance and ongoing efforts. It helps us ensure that we're fiscally efficient, that we get the biggest bang for our buck. It allows us to track progress over time, which is something I think we will all very much be happy to have in 6 years when it comes to potentially propose a renewal of the ballot measure. It helps us communicate with residents and stakeholders using both data and field experience. So data is not meant to replace field experience. It's meant to support field experience, to illustrate field experience. We live in a world where people want data points. People are happy when we speak in terms of percentage reduction, in terms of dollar by acres of impact, et cetera. And it also helps us provide evidence for support grant-seeking efforts to support future maintenance work on our fuel breaks or other work. Next slide, please, Scott. So just briefly, I wanted to go over your 5 strategic goals and see what risk needs to be quantified. So for goal number 1, vegetation management, clearly we need to quantify the fire and fuels risk. Goal number 2, detection, alert, and evacuation. That's our most complex strategic goal, in my opinion. We have, through the evacuation risk assessment, quantified fire and fuel risk, traffic risk, and communication and demographic risk. Goal 3 and 4, I'm going to leave aside at the moment. They're a little bit different in nature, so we're not including them here. Goal 5 is on parcel risk. So that's defensible space and home hardening. And there again, we're back at fire and fuels risk, quantifying fire and fuels risk. Scott, one more slide, please. So we've talked a lot about modeling, and I want to clarify a few things that, just to make sure we're all speaking the same language. MWPA does not pay for anyone to develop new fire behavior models. We don't do that. That's research and development that's done in the academic setting. That is not something that our money, our tax dollars go to. What we do is we take our data, our very local Marin County data, and we feed it through existing and accepted and sort of off the shelf, so to speak, models. And that's where I want to go back to what I said at the beginning about the science moving very fast, because in the last 5 years, there's been a real big increase in activity around looking at these models, right? But we're not touching that. We're letting the scientists do that. We're just giving our data to these models, feeding it through, see what it takes. But we do adopt a strategy of comparing and contrasting these models and make sure we are at the edge of science and use the best and the most appropriate model for our needs. So going back to the goals for quantifying fuels and fire risk on goal 1, Willow Labs is helping us with that, and Scott can speak more to it, but he uses Flam Map, and will be using Flam Map in conjunction with the minimal travel model when he moves to pathway and splats analysis, which is something you'll hear about through the work plan development. For goal 2, evacuation risk assessment, Sonoma Technology and their subcontractors have used the Elmfire model, which is an open source Pyrogen developed model. For traffic, you have just heard Director Torrance's update on Ladris AI modeling. We also have used the Transportation Authority of Marin traffic demand model as part of the evacuation risk assessment. And then for communication, we're not really modeling anything. We're just assessing the risk related to our demographics and alerting systems. And for goal 5, coming back to Willow Labs, and you're going to hear more about it in just a few seconds. We are in a pilot program with Colorado State because there is a science group there, an engineering group that is developing one of 2, to my knowledge, only 2 structure-to-structure propagation model in the built environment. So we're already under contract with this group to provide them with our data and see how their model works here. I just want to emphasize again that the models that you see listed under goal 1 and 2, those have existed for several decades, but they're wildfire models. They're not built environment model. There's only 2 that are in development that look at the propagation of fire in the built environment. And that's where we want to be, because that's critical for our area. So I hope this introduction is helpful. I'm happy to take any comment or question. I know we talked a lot about modeling. We bounce around a lot of company names and so on. So I wanted to clarify. And then now I'd like to allow Scott to show him his fantastic work, as mentioned by Chief Weber. Very exciting developments here for MWP as a whole. Scott, your turn. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to speak here. So I want to start off, and I want you to imagine everything that we can do to mitigate wildfire risk, right? And we can kind of break those down into 2 categories. We can change public behavior, or we can alter the fire behavior. So in the public behavior category, we have things like alerting, we have traffic flow, we have educating the public. And then in the fire behavior category, we work from the house out. We have home hardening, we have defensible space, we have shaded fuel breaks. And then as we get to further out into the wildlands, we might do some strategic local area treatments or splats. And so the projects I'm going to be talking about today are looking along this spectrum of things that we can do to change fire behavior, to measure this on-parcel risk, and to measure and analyze how our vegetation management projects are contributing to public safety. And really the objective here is to come up with some key metrics that we can track over time and over space, so that we can prioritize and track our risk over time to improve programming. So first, we have this on-parcel risk assessment. So this is a risk assessment of home hardening and defensible space factors that have been collected during the inspection program. So the way that we do that is we take the inspection data that's coming out of the inspection program, what was found on a parcel, where was it found, any other attributes that we have about what the inspector found during that inspection, and we enrich that data with fire weather scenarios. So we use a Diablo wind scenario and a dry sea breeze scenario to characterize fire behavior under different hazardous weather conditions in Marin. And we look at the topography and the environment in which that particular finding was found. So was it found on a parcel on a steep slope or on a gentle slope, in a valley bottom or on an exposed ridge top? And then finally, we look at neighborhood density. Was it found in an area with very tightly packed structures, or was it found in an area with a more rural characteristic? And we feed all of this enriched data into our fire behavior analysis, which we'll talk about in just a second. And we come away with a risk assessment that allows us to look at demographics. Who's affected? What issues are affected in different subgroups, by income, by race, by internet access? We can look at the change in risk over time. We can look at the impact of various programs that we have and understand where we might be able to help those programs do better in subsequent years. And this really helps us with resident communication and helping make sure that we are telling the residents to reduce the highest risk items first. So when we think about fire behavior on a particular parcel, it is a little bit different than if we were to think about what wildland fire behavior looks like. So when we're assessing a finding on a private parcel, what fire behavior looks like, we look at ember cast, the potential for that discovery to cast embers on downwind structures, the potential for it to expose nearby structures to direct flame contact or radiant heat that would be sufficient to ignite those structures. We look at structural vulnerability and the role of home hardening, vent screens, double pane windows, things of that nature. And then we look at the continuity of the parcel and whether those findings are contributing to an ignitability through wind-driven embers, or just providing a contiguous path of fuel towards a structure that would potentially cause its ignition. And what this technique allows us to do is to assign an individual risk for each individual finding that an inspector records during their visits. And so what we're looking at here is the distribution of risk scores for all discoveries in Marin, all things that have been found in Marin. And then in red, we have all of the times that an inspector found a juniper tree in Marin over the last 2 years. And we can see here that the average juniper tree is substantially more risky than the average thing that you would find, grasses and leaves, trash cans in zone 0, things like that. But what we can also see is that there are some juniper trees that are among the most risky things that we could find anywhere in Marin. So if we want to really target those particular issues, we might want to go look at these juniper trees that are in this tail here, and that would give us a lot of bang for our buck in terms of reducing the most risky issues. And of course, our goal is to facilitate and support programming. So we can make maps, we can give lists of parcels on which these issues are found. We can look at when they're resolved, how they're resolved, were they resolved by a grant? And then again, we can look at demographics and who's affected by these most risky issues. To date, we have over 500,000 inspection findings so far. And these have been scored and have a risk score associated with them, just shy of 40,000 parcels over these 2 years. And there's a lot of really exciting analysis that we can do on this data. But I want to leave you with 2 key outcomes of this data that we've come to so far, and it really related to the change between 2022 and 2023. The first is a 12.8% reduction in the average inspection finding risk between those 2 years. So when an inspector goes and finds a thing on a parcel in Marin, this analysis suggests that that thing is 12.8% less risky than it would have been in 2022. So really exciting, tracking progress over time here. And second, we can see that on re-inspected parcels that were inspected in both 2022 and in 2023, the fraction of risk that remains on that parcel or has been resolved by the resident on that parcel increased by 3 times between 2022 and 2023, suggesting both that residents are actively resolving risk and also that the reinspection program, like continuous visits of those parcels, gives us a tangible benefit in terms of risk resolved in Marin. So next steps on this side of the house, we're going to be doing a workshop in mid-April with agency staff focusing on all the details that we can get from this analysis, demographics, how we can work with programming to really incorporate these findings. We're also going to be moving towards a real-time assessment. So using some software to enable us to get within an hour of inspection risk scores for every item that was found on a particular parcel, which will enable us to communicate more rapidly with the resident on which the finding was found, and also guide prioritization and inspection in the 2024 field season. And then finally, as Charlotte mentioned, we're going to be integrating this structure-to-structure analysis, giving a little bit more depth to this risk assessment process. Now I want to switch gears and we'll talk a little bit about quantifying the risk benefits that we get from fuel breaks and other fuel reduction projects. So here we take the planned or approved or implemented vegetation management plans, so where the project's going to happen, what's going to be done, and we look at the current vegetation in that area, and then we predict after treatment, and then for a period of 10 years after treatment, what the surface, the canopy, and the forest structure will look like in order to predict the future fire behavior. And again, we do that immediately after treatment, and we do that for a project lifespan over the next 10 years, which allows us to perform a risk assessment that gives us that temporal and also that spatial dynamic of how these fuel treatment projects are contributing to public safety. And we look at that through the lens of where we can facilitate additional fire suppression actions and who and how many people are going to be affected by that project. And this, again, is all designed to support programming and support resident communication, and allows us to look at where we may need to supplement these vegetation management projects with perhaps on-parcel risk reduction or some other programming. And we ideally would be able to feed this prioritization and implementation back into future projects in future years and really create a data-driven life cycle here. So we've completed 4 projects to date, and I just want to give you a taste of the data that's kind of coming out of these projects. So for example, the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, we can see predicted 63% reduction in flame length across that entire project, a 2.2 time increase in the area that would be accessible to firefighters within that project footprint, a substantial reduction in rate of spread, which has very interesting benefits in terms of evacuation time and time to get firefighters into strategically important areas, as well as a really substantial reduction in the potential for the fire to spread from the surface to the canopy. We are refining these metrics, and so we've come up with a list of 4 metrics that we think are really, or I guess this is 5 metrics that we think are really important in speaking to the value of these vegetation management projects. So decrease in flame length, increase in area accessible to firefighters, decrease in rate of spread, decrease in that canopy fire potential, and the effective lifespan. So when would we need to prioritize maintenance and come back to these areas? The metrics I showed you on the last slide, right? Very, very high level, averaged across the entire treatment area. But we can get super granular and we can get to, particular locations on the landscape. What do we expect to happen in those locations? What do we expect to happen from particular treatment methodologies? And then again, over time, when would we need to come back to that? Next steps on the vegetation management projects, we're going to be introducing fire pathways modeling. So this is a wildfire modeling technique that allows us to delineate areas where fuel, topography, and wind all align to create rapid fire spread that may outpace our ability to control that fire. And so this will allow us to further prioritize and refine those priority areas in terms of these vegetation management projects. Additionally, we're working to facilitate communication with residents and other stakeholders about the benefits of these projects, supporting agencies as they go out and actually implement these projects, as well as prioritize within a particular project, where do I start this project, and maintenance, when do I need to go back to that project. Participating in project planning and development. So as agencies are coming up with new projects, what are the potential benefits of those projects potentially earlier in their lifespan than we are already starting to implement these projects. Tracking risk reduction over time. Ideally, we'll be able to see similar statistics to what I shared with you earlier on the on-parcel, right? We want to be able to show that we're making progress and moving the needle on risk reduction in terms of this vegetation management. And then really combining these two types of analysis into a single integrated analysis. And so one way that that could look is, where is there residual risk after we have completed a shaded fuel break that we need to supplement with defensible space and home hardening? Other questions that we might ask are, where should we be doing maintenance versus where should we be going out and doing additional programs? Would we be better off spending on a shaded fuel break or on some of these home hardening and defensible space projects from perhaps like a grant perspective? And we can get super local with that as well. So really tying all of the sort of system of fire behavior alterations that we have in our control into a single risk assessment framework. And Charlotte, I'll turn this last slide back over to you.
Thank you, Scott. So I'm sure you all have a lot of questions. It's really fantastic to work with Scott. And I just want to say as a parenthesis, I've been working in impact evaluation for the public sector for over 20 years. And this is probably as close to perfect as a textbook, impact evaluation plan as you could wish to have. So it's really exciting. As soon as we talk about sort of risk assessment, modeling, all these sort of things, of course, we owe it to ourselves to validate this exercise and to make sure that it's as realistic as possible, even though we know we'll never be able to match, what would happen or compare to what would happen if a fire were to come through. But a few points here. So we are currently, we did a field validation experiment to compare the risk scores generated by Scott's work with the risk that field inspectors of different levels of experience would predict for certain findings. And we found that there's general agreement between the model and what our field inspectors were thinking. So that's a good thing. No need to adjust the model. Of course, we would only adjust the model, not the field experience. We have sent this work around to be peer reviewed by several experts, including UC Berkeley, IBHS, and so on. They had only very minor changes to suggest, which we have integrated at this point. In the future, we're working to obtain validation by actuarial experts to ensure that it's accurate, that it is a good use case scenario. And Mark can speak a little bit more to that as needed. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we are working to compare and contrast the models that exist today with what might exist in 3 months or in 6 months or in a year, and keep ourselves up to date with the science. So Scott will answer all your question, and I'm available as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That was incredible. Questions from the board? Yes, Rachel.
How do we take this information and move it to, or at least partner and share it with the insurance companies?
Through the validation, actuarial validations that we're working on.
That's why we're working with a couple of different actuarials that are the recognized experts of the insurance industry, and getting them to fall in love with this product and then get the word into the insurance industry.
It's not entirely easy because the data set that we have is brand new, and it's so much better than anything else out there that it's almost hard for them to believe it. I will just say that, but yes.
Yeah, Catherine.
One of the elements was to increase in area accessibility for firefighters. Is there any way to implement data into this that deals with fixed wing aircraft or helicopter water drops? Because those are a tool that we've used here in Marin many times. I was just wondering if there's a way that that may be a variable to change the data.
That's an interesting idea. It's one that we have not considered so far. We've mainly thought about the area accessible to ground firefighters because that's a easily conceptualized by the public, right? And it would allow, it kind of helps to understand where we're moving the needle in terms of being able to engage the fire. But I think that the benefits from a shaded fuel break or a fuel treatment also have benefits from fixed wing aircraft or helicopters in terms of being able to engage the fire in a lower intensity environment. So that's certainly something that we could explore in the future.
I just wonder if there's a way to put a layer over for what sort of capacity a fixed wing aircraft can deploy the amount of water into a field area. I was thinking of the fire not too long ago, or maybe a couple of years ago, just kind of up here and around the corner, and a plane was there within what, 20 minutes? Yeah, in Marinwood. It was near Marinwood. I'm just curious about because I know the state has invested in a lot of aircraft in the last several years. So be interesting to see what that coverage would provide as far as your data.
If I can add on to it, so every fire that happens in Marin on a medium to a high dispatch level, which is 90% of the fires that we dispatch, have air attack, which is the person that coordinates two fixed wing and a copter. And that copter is going to carry about 1,000 gallons. The fixed wings are carrying 1,200 gallons of retardant, water in the copter, retardant in the fixed wing. The main challenges for fixed wing is wind. And same with the rotor wing to be able to hit the targets and gut judge for the wind. The next impediment is canopy coverage. So there's a fine balance between we want to keep canopy, but if there's lack of canopy, then the retardant can penetrate down to the ground better. However, with the fact that we're removing fuel loading and the intensities will be much lower, then for me, I think the best, and I'm looking at Scott now, I think the best way to calculate that is the decrease in BTUs and then translate that into how we've increased the efficiency of aircraft.
Yeah, I think that there's absolutely an avenue to explore there and really be able to characterize the multiplicative benefits, right, in terms of being able to engage the fire in multiple different ways and probably be much more effective in engaging the fire, in these treated areas.
I had a question in terms of how will we communicate this prioritization to the public? Because all of this work is expensive and time consuming, but it's helping everyone get the most bang for their buck. And I'm just wondering, it's complicated and nuanced. I'm wondering if we will develop a simple message to help the public understand.
Scott, can you share your screen, the fact sheet, please?
Yep.
So Scott will show one example of public communication that we've put together for each of the 3 projects that he's modeled so far. It doesn't directly address your question about prioritization, just because, frankly, there needs to be a strategic discussion around that first. But we're still at the stage where we're trying to convince the public that fuel breaks are a good idea. I think the next presentation will speak to that a little bit. I think these metrics are helping. And then the next stage would be, we're working with the agencies to help them in terms of prioritization. And then I think that then from there, that can translate into communicating with the public, if that makes sense. But yeah, this is a simple 2-pager that outlines the key metrics that Scott was discussing in his presentation for the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. We have the same one for Novato and the same one for the San Rafael San Anselmo fuel reduction zone. The agencies are currently reviewing and will be, distributing them as soon as they're approved by staff. Of course, it's a paper version. Agencies will need a GIS interface, sort of the more zoom in, zoom out kind of platform for the same data. And that's in the works. It's part of the discussion we'll hold with the agencies in April.
Josh, can you see? Oh, sorry.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions. One, I thought the juniper tree like risk distribution graphic was really interesting, and I was wondering if there's kind of breakouts for other sorts of hazards, like maybe it's a pile of dead bamboo, and if just to kind of understand how different specific risks change the distribution if they're broken out differently.
Yeah, super good question. In the report that we created for last year's data, and will need to be updated with the 2023 data, which I'm currently working with, we did this for all 100-ish types of data. So we would have those histograms for each of those types. And there's certainly a very big range, right, in terms of being far on the right side of that histogram versus being kind of right on that left side where the majority of those inspection findings are. And then from there, we'd be able to prioritize by types or within types.
Thanks. And then, so was juniper sort of the furthest right from last year, or it's just being profiled as an example?
It is the example profile because it has some very interesting characteristics and how that diagram looks. The furthest to the right last year and this year as well is combustible fences attached to the structure because of the highly contiguous nature of those fences, right? They bring fire into the house. They also have substantial fire intensity and can cast embers themselves.
Okay, thanks. That's just really interesting and sort of helpful to know as we talk to people. The next question I had to do with the reduction, the risk reduction for the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. One of the things I was wondering is how does that change? How do those percentages change for different types of fire behaviors? So, for example, for like I don't know all the different characteristics, but if it's maybe like a relatively humid fall day with low wind, maybe is the reduction greater, or is it, maybe the reduction is really realized on the tail, whereas you have extreme conditions. But I'd be really interested in sort of like the sensitivity of those things.
Scott, if you don't mind, I'll just, so in the interest of time, so we have completed a sensitivity analysis for the purposes of planning and prioritization and program design. We look at different weather scenarios, different types of circumstances. We retain the riskiest, which is a decision we make. We can go another route, but we retain the riskiest for planning purposes. So it's up for discussion. Yeah.
Okay, great. That was my follow-up question. Thanks for answering. And then I just have one last question, which Charlotte, you sort of addressed, because as I was reading this, I was like, wait, another model, because there's so many. But is there, I think it was maybe the last slide of your presentation, is there just a place where we can look to kind of reorient whenever, like what the different models are and what they each contribute? And what I heard you say was actually how they overlap, because you're trying to sort of generate different.
So my slides are available. They'll be part of the public record for this meeting. We can certainly create more reference materials on the website as far as naming the models that we use and the methodologies that we use. Each and every one of the projects and the work on parcel, Scott prepares a detailed methodology report for each of these projects. So like I mentioned, the agencies are currently reviewing this work, and as soon as they approve it for release, it'll be available on the website under each project's page. And I think we're also working with Fire Safe Marin and others to create some education around terms like flame length. Why do we care about flame length? Direct attack. Why do we care about direct attack? Sort of more general education on the key concepts that are necessary to understand the benefits of an analysis like this.
Okay, thank you. Great responses.
Christine?
I just have one really quick question. Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you, Scott. Just building on Alexis's initial question about the data, how are you ensuring that the data sets are refreshed and updated over time? I understand weather pattern data is probably easier to obtain because we already have it, but what about if, for example, a new construction site goes up, or for example, a new development goes up overnight? How are we partnering with agencies to ensure that the data is correct?
I'll take that question, Scott. Thank you for that. That's a great question. So there's two sides of this, right? There's the on-parcel risk related to our inspection programs. In the budget proposal for next year, we've included the development of APIs so that Scott can receive inspection data as it occurs, and then calculate the score and send it back to be available in the residence report within an hour. So that's meant to help. We know the residents get inspected and they open their report shortly after inspection. So we want to capture that time. We have their attention during that time. We want to make sure we list the riskiest findings first. We don't want to scare anybody with, red flags and risk scores and whatnot, but we do want to use this tool to help that draw their attention to the riskiest items on their parcel. That's one example of the applicability. So that's a 24-hour turnaround, and the data flows really easily there between our partner Fireside and Scott for his analysis. So like I said, that's starting next year. Currently, we're just doing data downloads and uploads back and forth as needed. For vegetation management and fuel break projects, we are developing data collection tools. This is something that's definitely on my mind, and I know on Scott's mind, and and Jacob as well. As you can tell from the presentation, so far Scott is working on planned activities, right? He's working on what is planned for this fuel break, what is proposed for under the proposal for the treatment. We don't have a flow of data coming back from the field as the treatment gets implemented back to Scott and so forth. So we're working on creating that data flow. We think for fuel breaks and vegetation projects in general, we don't need to do it over 24 hours or an hour. We could do it quarterly. That would be perfectly fine and sufficient. But we do need that easy sort of back and forth, because it does need to be a feedback loop that is constantly updated for everybody to use that data effectively.
Anybody else? Josh, can you see if there's any public comment?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Any further discussion or comments? I think this is all fantastic. Thank you both so much. Really excellent.
We got a hand raised briefly.
Okay.
Kingston Cole, you lowered your hand, but just in case. All right, no, hands
No?
hands
Okay.
down, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Item 8.9B, research and resources related to efficacy of shaded fuel breaks. Ann Krelock and Vegetation Management Specialist Jacob Dadman will provide a presentation on this item.
Thank you so much. We have been really excited to dive into the science, not only in the modeling world and building tools and building our understanding of project implementation, but also really diving into science that comes up in some of our conversations with the public about shaded fuel breaks and vegetation management, forest management in general, and how that works and how that actually can reduce risk. And so one of the great luxuries of having vegetation management specialists is that you get to delegate things. And so Jacob kindly spent some time digging into the peer-reviewed literature, case studies, et cetera, and developed a white paper. And we're going to be able to use that white paper to develop resources to help convey this science out to the public. So I'll hand it over to Jacob.
All right. Good evening or afternoon, directors. I appreciate the time and the introduction. I'm going to be sharing my screen real quick. Sorry, one sec. So that you can all see. Cool. So yeah, Thank you for the introduction. I will get into what it's about. So this white paper, which is published on the website, and I will show you how you can access it, is a 12-page research paper focusing on the effectiveness and as well as the ecological benefits of shaded fuel breaks as a vegetation management strategy, in particular in reducing fire severity and the rate of spread. It cites 25 peer-reviewed sources as well as firsthand testimony from fire professionals working in areas that have been treated and have not been treating, and the differences between them. It also cites 2 real-world examples of shaded fuel breaks working, and as well as 1 computer model example of what would have happened at the campfire if shaded fuel breaks had been implemented. And finally, it has recommendations on how to maximize the efficacy of future fuel reduction projects. And the photo on the right is the title page of the paper. So before I talk about what's in the paper, I want to talk about where you can access it. It is on the Marin Wildfire website. If you go to resident info and then science and research, it's the first link on that page. It's called Effectiveness of Shaded Fuel Breaks on Fire Severity. So the paper is useful for a whole host of reasons. First of all, it's a bank of research and analysis that member agencies can pull and use in response letters, in engagement materials, anything that you may need those sort of quick facts and figures for, as well as the pre-written analysis and language of those peer-reviewed sources, so that you all don't have to do that over and over and over again if you are writing a response letter, if you're including it in somewhere. Those standard verbiage and statistics are also really helpful in communications to residents in compliance documents. It's also a helpful resource to give engaged and concerned residents. It's a pretty big document, so this is not necessarily something that it's publicly accessible, but it's not necessarily something that we're going to be going door to door with. But if you have particular residents who are interested in and engaged and want to learn more, this is a great place to put them. And then finally, it does have recommendations that veg managers like myself can consider in future project development and implementation to maximize both the effectiveness at reducing fire severity and the ecological benefit. On the right here is a really helpful comparison of photos that we've seen to be very effective in talking about shaded fuel breaks. At the top is a clear cut, an aerial image of a clear cut, which is oftentimes what people think that we're doing on these fuel reduction projects. And then below is an actual shaded fuel break. So by showing these 2 photos back to back, we can really, it helps get in people's minds as to what these vegetation management projects are actually doing versus what they think they're doing. At the bottom, like I show this photo to people and they don't even think that work has been done there. And that's kind of the gold standard for vegetation management. And so that's one of the helpful things that we found, and it's included in the paper. I want to talk about a few major takeaways from the research so that you don't have to be reading it while I'm talking. First of all, shaded fuel breaks are extremely effective at reducing fire severity and the rate of spread. I'm sure a lot of people in this room already know this, but it's helpful to have that scientific backing. Shaded fuel breaks do not increase wind speeds or ember spotting in any measurable way. The actual genesis of this project was we were starting to get a few public comments of some concerned residents who were concerned that shaded fuel breaks may increase wind behavior and ember spotting. And so we wanted to dive in a little more deep into that to figure out what was happening there, figure out if there's any scientific backing to that. And we were able to conclude pretty conclusively that that's not the case. So that's a nice thing to know. It's a nice place to send people if you start getting messages like that. Another major takeaway, which is demonstrated by this photo on the right, is that vegetation management, defensible space, and home hardening all work together to improve outcomes for structure survival. As Mark mentioned before, this is really an important key part of what the MWPA is. It's a systems approach. This is a photo from the 2013 mountain fire in the San Jacinto wilderness. As you can see, the fire came down this hill, and then it hit a shaded fuel break, and then it hit defensible space improvements, and then it did not hit hardened home. All these features work together. The structure would not have survived without all 3 together. So that's another major takeaway, that we want to make sure that when we're doing the outreach that we're hammering this home. okay, we went through it and we did a shaded fuel break in your neighborhood. Now it's up to you to make sure that you're up to date on your defensible space and on your home hardening, and we have programs to help you out on that. Finally, the shaded fuel breaks really closely match the disturbance regimes of pre-colonial coastal California, where high frequency, low severity fires came through and opened up the canopy somewhat. They reduced fuel loads, they added heterogeneity that reduced the likelihood of a massive destructive wildfire coming through. We're doing much of the same vegetation management with shaded fuel breaks. And then an interesting thing that we haven't, that as a Joint Powers Authority haven't been implementing as much, but is an interesting thing to consider, is that prescribed burns provide some of the longest lasting fuel reduction benefits. A few recommendations from the research that I wanted to highlight is that increasing canopy heterogeneity is a major strategy, even within shaded fuel breaks, to reduce fire severity. One of the sources that I found really interesting is a meta-analysis of over 1,200 vegetation management projects throughout the Western US, and they found that the biggest predictive factor of fuel break effectiveness is the diameter of the retained trees. And it really brings home this idea that these large, widely spaced trees, widely spaced forests is what is the most resilient to fire, and that thinning out those smaller diameter, more denser stands does not increase fire severity, even if you are increasing light availability on the forest floor. Because those larger trees that you're retaining can kind of release and fill in that canopy somewhat, and you do want a certain amount of canopy heterogeneity. It's also important when we're doing these projects to understand the role of untreated or maybe not as intensely treated riparian areas, particularly in our linear shaded fuel breaks, as possible fuel bridges, where if you have a linear shaded fuel break and then a particular area within that that's not treated as heavily because it's a riparian area, the fire may hit that and may move through that shaded fuel, move through that particular area more quickly than it would the fuel break around it because there's more vegetation left there. Understanding that treating those riparian areas like everywhere else on that fuel break isn't possible logistically, financially, in a regulatory sense. So planning around that risk and understanding that risk is an important part of our project development. Building temporal, spatial, and biological diversity into treatment plans, particularly for our strategically placed landscape area treatments, is critically important because in a splat, a fire may move in from multiple directions, where in linear shaded fuel break, it's a line, it's coming into it at one point. When the fire is able to move in from multiple directions, your best defense against the high severity, quick moving fire is diversity. It's heterogeneity that slows down the fire's ability to move through that landscape, and it's something that works from multiple angles. So building that diversity into your treatment is really critical. And finally, and this is something that we're all thinking about and was mentioned in the previous presentation, monitoring and retreating these projects aggressively and quickly is really important for keeping that fuel risk low. On the right here is a graph from the Forest Service analysis of the 2013 mountain fire, where they looked at previous fuel treatments and then how they aged until the mountain fire hit them. And what we see here is that your most aggressive regrowth, your most aggressive decay of that fuel break effectiveness is in that first 5 years. This dashed red line below shows what that regrowth would be if it increased linearly at the same rate versus this first sort of more aggressive curve coming up until the sort of balanced linear increase. And you can see that at 5 years, at 10 years, it's a 30% difference in regrowth. So it's really that first 5 years, that first 3 to 5 years, you're experiencing the most aggressive regrowth. That's your critical retreatment window. The Forest Service found that your treatment benefits wash out basically at around 7 years. That's fairly consistent with what we're seeing with our modeling too, and that you lose half of your benefits in the first 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 years. So it's this first window that's important. So monitoring and understanding what that retreatment window is important in making sure that you keep the risk low, not that you just lower it and then let it rise again. A few engagement material. So the major benefit of this white paper is that it's 12 pages of in-depth academic writing. The major drawback of this paper is that it's 12 pages of in-depth academic writing. We want people to be able to access this. We want people to be able to understand this, and we can't expect every Marin resident to be a subject matter expert on wildfire. So what we are doing is we're partnering with FireSafe Marin on a multimedia effort with infographics, with short videos and longer form videos, social media posts, etc., newsletters, to take the salient facts of this research and present them in a more engaging way. We're focusing on the shaded fuel break effectiveness, on the ecological benefit, and in the coordination with defensible space and home hardening, like I was talking about before. One of the major sort of shifts in how we're talking about ecological impacts of shaded fuel breaks, as maybe compared to our earlier days, is we're beginning to understand that not only do shaded fuel breaks not harm the ecosystems that they touch, they actually in many cases restore and improve those ecosystems, because we're coming through and removing massive amounts of invasive species, because we're opening up that canopy a little more and allowing more shade intolerant species like the Douglas iris pictured there, which is on the Greater Ross Valley shaded fuel break, to come up from the understory. We're creating that spatial, temporal, biological diversity that improves ecosystem outcomes and resiliency. So that's another sort of major shift that we're doing with this social media push with FireSafe Marin. It's going to be a rollout over multiple weeks on social media channels, on our website. And one ask that we have from you all as representatives of your member agencies is opportunities where you can boost that materials. Maybe you repost something on your Facebook. Maybe you link something in your monthly newsletter, something like that. And we'll have more materials for you to be able to access in order to show that. But expanding that range, because this is, to be frank, one of our primary vegetation management strategies. It's not going away. I hope it will be expanding over more of the county. So in imbuing in the residents of Marin a general understanding of what it is, how it works, and why it's a benefit helps us all and lays the groundwork for more ambitious projects. So that's it. I'm happy to take any questions. I also want to sort of, if anyone has something that they want to talk about more in depth or questions, concerns, I'm happy to sit down with anyone, exchange a few emails to answer those questions more specifically, but I'm also happy to take questions here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bruce.
Jacob, thank you for an astoundingly relevant piece of work. I really congratulate you on all the work you did and all the scientists you talked about. I have a question about the last paragraph before your conclusions and recommendations. And it's that you did a meta-analysis of 12 or 1,300 publications on fuel treatment and summarized that in essence, found on average reduced canopy scorch, and then there was a reduced flame lengths by 2 feet. And so my question is, the data that we've been seeing here in the analytical work that precedes the fuel breaks, work Ross Valley, Nevada, others, we're seeing substantially more significant reductions in flame length, starting flame lengths and the resulting flame lengths. Is there maybe a subset of that meta-analysis that more clearly reflects the kind of work that we're doing here? That's one question. And then secondly, I would just suggest that we want to tease out the work that we in fact are doing, and that in fact 2 feet is not what we're hearing. We're hearing reductions like from 14 feet to 2 to 3. So anyway, if you can just address the flame length, I appreciate it. But incredible. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I appreciate the kind words, definitely. I think the reason, so that's like you said, it's an analysis of 1,200 fuel reduction projects. So you kind of law of large numbers, so that the average comes down to sort of probably a lower number. It's also a lot of projects across the whole Western US. So there's a whole lot of different ecosystem types. If you think about like, if it's if there's a project in like Lodgepole Pine, which has a high severity fire regime, a fuel treatment project isn't going to have that much of an impact because the fire is still going to be high severity. To your point about the difference in flame length reduction that we see versus what's in the paper, I think the reason is because we are going for the riskiest stuff first. You know, we're going for the lowest hanging fruit that is putting the most people in danger where we can make the most difference. So I think it would make a lot of sense for that flame length reduction to be much higher. Maybe if we did 1,200 fuel reduction projects across the whole county, the sort of average would go, but we're going for the riskiest stuff first. So that's what I think. I don't have access to the raw data from that paper, so I couldn't get the subset. But it's definitely something that, like, I think when it comes to flame length, obviously the specific modeling that we're doing for our specific projects are going to give a better representation than a more wider data set like that paper. Mhm.
Thank you for putting this together. I'm very much into the science of this. And I appreciate that your bibliography is actually has some international work it's in it. I'm particularly interested in on page 8, where you have one of your bullet points where you look at Hines, who is from Victoria, Australia, and the recommendation that incorporate long-range spotting risk from eucalyptus trees into risk assessment and more aggressively remove eucalyptus in the WUI. It's a main complaint I hear as an elected is, why aren't we getting rid of more of the eucalyptus trees? In fact, really removing them entirely in their stands. So I'll look into this more, but I appreciate that you actually incorporated a declarative statement in there, using the data, which comes from a highly flammable place, which is Australian eucalyptus, which are imported here. So I'll continue to look into that, but thank you for showing that data point, because now I can find the research paper about that.
Yeah.
Eucalyptus as an elected person is the primary thing that people complain about in my community that we need to get rid of.
Mhm.
So Bruce is shaking his head. Are you agreeing with me?
Anybody else? Josh, can you see if there's any comments or questions from the public?
We have one hand raised. Rebecca Suggs, you may now share your comment.
Hi, thanks. On the chart that indicated how long rework should happen or when it should happen, is that graph telling us that we should be retreating in 3 to 5 years?
It is, I don't know if it's telling us that we should retreat in 3 to 5 years. It's telling us that we have our most aggressive regrowth in the first 3 to 5 years. So it's kind of a decision that managers have to make of what is our acceptable sort of return of risk. Is it sort of a 50 coming back to, so if we have 100% risk now and 0% risk, or like a 100% reduction in risk after the treatment, is that sort of return to 50% where we want to retreat? Is it to 75%? Is it to 80? Like that's kind of a question that we have to think about as an organization, but it is giving us data on when we can expect that return to happen.
Thank you.
And I'll just add that monitoring for fuel regrowth and budgeting for maintenance is a big topic of conversation, and creating a monitoring program for our projects that incorporates that type of measurement is something that we've been talking about and working with Willow Labs in Charlotte on, and our and Panorama and Sequoia, and kind of thinking that through and incorporating that into what we do moving forward. It's going to vary from site to site and jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and depending on what vegetation is there, how often you need to retreat. So it'll be, you know, kind of site to site and not a uniform policy.
Great, thank you.
Any further discussion on this item? Thank you, Jacob. That was really great work. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Number 10, board members' requests regarding future agenda items. Any requests? Oh, Alexis, yes.
Yes, I have a request. It was something we talked about a little bit a couple meetings back, which was just understanding sort of what the local funds are going to as they're allocated out to, you know, our respective jurisdictions. And I just was wondering if there's been any, you know, updates and kind of bringing or, you know, compiling that information back to us or anything along those lines. I know it's probably like herding cats.
We can connect with you offline if you like it, but the work plan does contain all of the local projects in there, if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I thought that we had talked about having like just, you know, more fuller reporting of what they look like, but let's talk offline.
Yeah.
Maybe we have it already. Thanks.
I think that was a comment from the COC, right? More information on the local projects and systematically gathering them. The last thing is I just want to remind everyone that we do not have an April meeting. So I will see you all here on May 16th. Thank you. We're adjourned.